teaching English in Japan was the place to go.
Well, Steffen, I am very happy that you came here early this morning.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my pleasure. Yeah.
Right. And I want to ask you, where were you born?
I was born in Sunnyvale, California.
You're a Californian too?
I'm a Californian too. So San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay.
And where I grew up was mostly fruit trees and farms. And I would ride my bike around through the fruit trees and farms. And
what year are we talking about now? Wait just a minute, because I'm from California too.
You are? Okay, I didn't know.
And I was born in the 50s.
Okay, yeah.
And
a little bit before me.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So you were born in the 60s?
I was born in 1971.
Oh, 71, okay.
Yeah.
So they still had orchards and stuff
They
going
did,
around there where you're at?
Uh-huh.
Do you have siblings?
No, I'm an only child.
The only child?
Yeah.
Are your parents with us, still with us?
They're both with us, thankfully enough. They live in Arizona.
Okay.
They left California about 15 years ago, actually, to live in a retirement community there. So unfortunately, I don't have any immediate relatives in California anymore.
Where are your mother and father from?
So they're originally from Los Angeles, but they grew up in Yosemite National Park.
Where'd your father go to school? Do you remember, in Los Angeles?
No, by the time he was school age, he was living in Yosemite National Park. So he went to school, elementary school, in Yosemite.
Okay, we used to go up there to visit all the time.
Really?
Okay. Yes, because there was a big tree you had to drive through. You remember big redwood?
Sure, the Wawona Tunnel.
That's right. It wasn't a tunnel.
It wasn't a tunnel. It was an actual tree.
There's one tree you had to drive through.
Yeah.
And it was a big redwood, because all those redwoods went up to forever.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And every now and then someone would say they saw a bear.
Yeah.
I never got to see one, but still.
Okay.
They were there.
Yeah.
And then the waterfalls. Yosemite.
Yeah. Wow. So you remember that
as
a
yes.
child. Yeah.
Oh, yes. That's where we went. We went to vacation all the time up Yosemite. It was so nice.
Yeah, but I think my parents were quite privileged because unlike many workers for both the Park Service and the concessionaire who lived outside of the park, they lived right below Half Dome, which is one of the iconic granite mountains in the park. My father's father was the head of the concessionaire.
Okay.
So he was president of the company.
Did you know him, your grandfather?
So he was actually my step-grandfather, not my real grandfather. That's another story.
Okay.
But he grew up, my father grew up essentially in the family of his stepfather. And I knew him a little bit up until I was maybe 8 or 9. And then unfortunately he passed.
Okay.
But I have memories of him. And after my grandfather retired, he lived in Palo Alto, not so far from where Steve Jobs lived. That part of the city, right. that area. And I remember going to his house and playing in the many rooms that he had in his house.
Did he have children too?
That's a good question.
Because it was your father's stepfather.
It was father's stepfather.
Did he have children of his own?
I think he had children of his own, but I wasn't close to them. No.
How old are your parents now?
They're in their 80s.
Okay.
So my mother is 81. My father is 85, if I get it right.
Yeah.
If they're watching us now, I hope they don't correct me.
They'll be watching when you send it to them. Once I send it to you and you say okay, you can send it to whoever you want.
Sure, thank you.
As a matter of fact, I encourage people to send it to all their connections so that you get more numbers and the viewing goes up, and ask them to share it.
Okay. Yeah.
No, that's great.
So that's my father's side. My mother's side. So my mother's father was an engineer for the Park Service, and they lived in a different part of Yosemite Valley.
He met her there?
So my mother and father went to school together.
In Yosemite?
In Yosemite.
In Yosemite, that's where they met.
And as you can imagine, there was a little bit of a rivalry between the kids of the families that worked for the concessionaire and those that worked for the Park Service. Kind of a different culture.
But why was it? What was the difference?
They had different backgrounds.
Okay, now okay, tell me what the purpose was for each. The concessionaires provided food and other things necessary, right?
Hotels,
and hotels, right?
Entertainment.
Right, that's what they provided.
Yeah,
and
right.
then
Park Service.
Services,
so
right.
they maintain the trails, for example.
Right, of course.
They provide interpretive services for the guests, so explaining the flora and the fauna and so forth. And my mother's father was involved in, for example, trail maintenance. Not physically maintaining the trails, but more designing the trails. So I originally grew up in Sunnyvale, until
right.
I was 13.
Okay.
And then...
but what was that like? Well, let's go through your childhood.
Sure.
When you were going through elementary school, what kind of child were you? Were you more academic or were you more sports-minded, being the only child?
I was pretty academic.
Really?
Yeah, so I like studying.
Did your parents have you when they were younger or older?
A little bit older, I think.
For their time, too.
For their time, yeah. They had been married for a number of years before they had me.
All right.
Yeah.
And then they put everything they had into you. They were with you all the time.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, they were. My dad was quite busy as a banker. He worked for the Bank of California in San Jose, and then that bank was bought by Wells Fargo, and he worked in San Francisco for a while. And interestingly, he had some Japanese bosses. So, and so he.
But that is when was that your first experience? It shouldn't have been. You're in California. You've met Asians before.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You know a lot of Asians.
So I didn't actually meet his coworkers himself, but I got to hear about his experience of, for example, going drinking after work, which isn't something that he enjoyed so much. He wanted to be home with the family.
Right.
Yeah.
So your mother was with you all the time? She stayed at home?
She was at home a lot of the time, but she also she worked. She had various jobs. Being Silicon Valley as it was, she, for example, worked for a company called MeasureX. They were a data storage, if I get this right, a data storage company, but with punch cards.
Punch cards.
And so she would operate this machine for storing data, numerical data, I suppose, on these large punch cards, and she would.
That's the old days. That's right. That's when you first started with computers. You had to use a punch card, right? Yeah. And they'd be pre-programmed as to what the computer would do based upon the punch card.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's right.
So I'm not so sure about the technical details, but she was involved in that type of work. I think she liked being independent and getting out and being part of society.
So you being academic in school, would you focus on the most? Did you like to read a lot, or were you?
I was a reader. Yeah, I was.
What were the things you liked to read?
I like not typical novels, but nonfiction. Biographies, historical novels. Having said that, one of my favorite books when I was pretty young was 1984 by George Orwell. If you can believe that. Even now, just looking at kids today, they don't read that kind of book anymore.
They don't, no.
Yeah. So without going too much into the book itself, I was fascinated by an omnipresent government having complete control over people's daily lives. And it's rather worrying that we've gotten to a point in society now when you talk about AI and machine intelligence and so forth, and seeing the types of abilities that governments and big companies have to monitor and control people's daily lives these days. It's very similar to what was in the book. It wasn't meant to be. The book wasn't meant to be a manual of how to run a society. It was meant to be a warning. Right. But in fact, you look at some of the politicians today, and
they're going on that book. That's right. It's a manual.
Book. Yeah.
So going through school, did you get involved in sports at all?
So I was a runner.
Okay. So, long distance or short? Or?
Medium distance. So I didn't do marathons. I didn't do sprints either. So my best, my favorite event was the 400 meter. I ran the 800 and there was a 200 race as well. This is in high school. And so, and I was living in close to Yosemite at the time, and we would take the school bus and go to various towns, hour, 2 hours away, and compete in tournaments, competitions.
But the leagues weren't very big, were they?
No,
I would think
so
you had
big.
that many kids out there anyway. Yeah.
No, more cows than
yeah,
kids,
I think so.
Yeah.
So, like in your school, how many people in your school total? In your graduating class?
Graduating class must have had maybe 130.
Wow.
So total school was about 500 people. 500.
So everyone
kids.
knew everyone.
Oh, definitely.
Going through junior high school, what did you find yourself starting to focus on more when you got into junior high school?
In junior high, so I definitely wanted to go to college, and where I was living, the town that I lived in was called Mariposa. Mariposa means butterfly in Spanish, and a very rural community. As I mentioned, more animals than people. I mean, honest to God, and many of the kids ended up staying in the town and didn't go to college, but there was a subset of kids that were on the academic track, and that's what I aspired to be or to do, be one of them. And so I took advanced placement courses, as they were called, mathematics, English, other sciences, history, and so forth. And I had really great teachers, so dedicated, and they inspired me to follow that track.
So what were you thinking about using it for?
So initially I was interested in psychology.
Okay.
And I actually, when I went to college at first, I started out off as a psychology major.
You didn't want to be a banker like your dad?
He didn't enjoy it as much as some
He tells
people
you this
enjoy.
later, or he was telling you during the time?
During the time.
During the time, he'd come home sometimes not so happy.
Yeah, it wasn't. I think he did it for the family, and maybe in his younger years he thought that being a banker was something that he would enjoy. But the reality was different than his image of that life early on.
One thing I want to take you back a little bit. Did you ever want to have siblings? Did you ever think about that?
You know, I never knew anything different, so I never regretted being an only child. I always found a way to entertain myself.
So like what? When you were a little kid, what'd you do? You went out and played with animals?
Not animals, so I collected stamps of all things.
A lot of people did, so did I.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And actually, not to jump around too much, but it was being by myself and collecting stamps that I was exposed to the world. Because it wasn't just American stamps, but from remote, faraway places.
And your imagination would start to take off.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Because there's so much information on the stamp. Of course, the currency, you've got, if it's part of the British Empire, you've got the symbol of the Queen. You've got the picture on the stamp, whether it's a flower or historical scene or famous figure, and so much to learn from this simple piece of paper.
Do you still collect stamps?
No, I still have parts of my stamp collection. At home somewhere, but it's not something I do actively. But I do enjoy buying pretty stamps. If I'm sending a Christmas card or something, I make sure to.
Do people still do that?
Yeah. They do. Yeah, they do.
My wife still does it. In Japan, they still do it. They still have the custom, especially for Ningajo, for the New Year's cards.
Oh, sure.
They make sure they do that religiously. Yeah. And I did for maybe a decade or two.
Okay.
And then I stopped.
And you don't send Ningajo?
And I just do it all through electronic. College, you decided you wanted to go into psychology. What did you obviously didn't, you went into something else.
So the first semester, I think it was, I went into psychology. I took the Psychology 101, and somehow it just wasn't for me. And probably I should have stuck it out more, to be honest. But I ended up going into language studies in French. And this is my first, French was the second foreign language that I studied. I had studied German in junior high, just with a private tutor.
Okay.
And from my experience studying German, I got interested in foreign languages, and I took French in high school initially. And the reason that I started getting into French was there were two language choices. You had to take a foreign language in high school.
You had to, yes.
I learned to speak a bit of French, and so that was in the back of my mind. And in college, I ended up switching from psychology to a language studies major.
Okay.
And so that's what really got me into being interested in living abroad, living outside the U.S.
So had you done any traveling as a kid outside the United States?
When I was 13, I went with my uncle, my mother's brother, and my cousin, and my uncle's girlfriend at the time. We went to Scandinavia.
Until 13, that's the first time you left the continental United States?
That was the first time, yeah, it was. And the reason we went to Scandinavia is my mother's family, this goes back some generations, is from Norway.
What about your father's side?
My dad's side, he has German roots, and actually his family had been in the U.S. and Canada for some generations.
Okay. So you got into college, you changed from your psychology major to a language major.
Yeah.
And you graduated with what?
So a bachelor's it's called Language Studies in French, which includes French language, but it also includes linguistics.
Okay. And then at 13, you said that you actually made your first trip outside the United States.
I did, yeah. Started in Holland,
right?
And then we went north, went through Belgium, I think, up into Denmark, and then Norway.
Do you remember what struck you first when you got off the plane in Holland and saw the people?
So much green, just the physical landscape, because it rains a lot in Holland. One thing that stood out for me in Holland was how narrow the houses were, because the houses, I guess the property tax is based on the width, or how much space you take up along the canals. And so everyone has a tall house, and it goes back deep, but it's narrow.
Yeah, right.
And the way they get their furniture in is there's a
hook on top of all the
top.
Yes, that's right.
They pull it up.
That's right. That's right.
Somehow I remember that quite clearly.
Yeah. Is that? And you've only been there once?
Just
at that time.
That was just the one time. That's right.
Wow.
But importantly, being away from my parents and being in Europe was so eye-opening, because it made me appreciate how many different kinds of people and cultures there are in the world. It gave me that spark.
But you already had the spark from collecting stamps.
Right. That's what started.
There.
It was already there.
It was already there. You had already had the seed, and it germinated, and then you're doing it, and you went.
Yeah, you're
it's
right.
It's real.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
So when you got out, what was your first job out of college?
First job out of college. So I went to undergraduate, then I went to graduate school, at the Monterey Institute of International Studies, where I studied teaching English to speakers of other languages, a TESOL degree, and graduated from that. And I met my now wife. She was my girlfriend in Monterey at the time, and so just a quick story.
Was she going to school there too?
She was going to school there. She was my housemate. No. She's from Yokohama.
Right.
And
so she was your housemate.
She was my housemate.
Okay. Now, how long did you know her before you guys decided you wanted to get married?
I think it was 3 years. She went to Ferris University in Yokohama and studied
English before she came.
English, and so she spoke English
well enough to get through. Yeah.
Well enough to get a high enough score on the TOEFL
rate
to be admitted to the school. But she initially went through the translation and interpretation program, which is very tough.
I know.
And she decided that wasn't for her, and she changed to the TESOL program, where I was. And so she was my housemate, and also I had some classes with her.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were fascinated right away when you first saw her. You just went,
Yeah.
what a housemate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So okay, so you graduated, and your first job was what?
So graduated. So my first job was working for NOVA.
I know
Yeah,
Nova, but wait.
NOVA, yeah.
In the States?
In Japan.
Wait. Okay. Wait. So you left. So since you'd met your wife,
Yeah.
did you get married in the States?
No, we decided to get married in Japan.
Did your parents meet her before she came?
They did. Yeah.
How'd they feel about it? You're
They
their
were
only son now. You're their only son now.
Yeah, I think it was hard for them to have me moving away from the
Okay, that was
from the
they were more
States.
concerned about that?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
They were very supportive.
Yeah.
And I would have understood if they weren't supportive.
Right.
But I had their blessing.
That's beautiful.
And same thing on my wife's family side.
But when did you meet them? You knew her for 3 years before. Had you come to Japan during that 3 years?
No, I'd never been to Japan.
Had her parents come to visit
But
her?
her mother and her mother's sister came for a visit at some point when we were in Monterey to kind of check me out. I think.
Because she already talked about her housemate.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it just the two of you in that house, or there were several of you?
We had one other woman.
Okay.
So there were two women, one of them being my now wife, and then there was and they shared a room, and there was an empty room, which and you know in the States it's common for students to
cohabitate, yeah.
To cohabitate if they don't know each other, even if.
But you go to the same university, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I rented this room in the apartment, and that's how I got to know.
Oh, that's neat. So they come to see you. They kind of say, okay, all right, let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
They give you a thumbs up.
Right.
And then you got a job with NOVA. Was
NOVA.
that your intention to start off? You wanted to go to Japan?
I did, yeah. So because at that time in the early mid-90s, so teaching English in Japan was the place to go. So companies were investing a lot of money. The working conditions were good, and I could be with my girlfriend, my future wife, and see Asia.
Where'd you go first?
Yokohama.
They sent you to her hometown.
Well, I had some say. I had a choice.
Oh, okay.
So I requested to work in Yokohama.
And what was your job? What did you have to do outside of teaching English? Did you have other responsibilities? Or was
no, it was just a straight up teaching English job. And what I think what I enjoyed most about that experience, which was only 5 months, I didn't stay long.
Because they didn't last long. They actually went under.
They went under. Yeah, they did.
Well, how long after you left did they go under?
A few years. It was pretty soon after, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
They went under because the bubble was done.
Yeah.
All right. So you were there for a couple of months, and then where'd you go from there?
And then I went to another company called ALC
which did
ALC Education, which it's another English. I was a corporate consultant, but essentially teaching English. But the difference was this is I was being dispatched to big companies like Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, Nissan, Fuji Photo Film, and working with very smart, interesting people
that really wanted to learn English.
That had a purpose to learn English. Yeah, purpose being working with colleagues from overseas or reading technical manuals in English and needing the information and so forth. And that was my first taste of the corporate world. And I got very, very interested in working in a company, not continuing my original path of being an English teacher for my life.
So how long did you stay with them?
I was with ALC for, I think it was 1.5 years, 2 years. And having a great time. I was in my mid-20s.
And you're married now?
Married now, living in Kanagawa. And what happened was I was part of this professional circle of English teachers, mostly in-house teachers. And someone that, dear friend of mine at the time, kind of a mentor to me, had said, we were having drinks and dinner, and said, oh, there's this job opening at Goldman Sachs for an English teacher, an in-house English teacher. And at that time, working in-house, that was the goal, right? That's where you wanted to be. And she said, it's a securities company. And I said, and I was thinking like ASLOC, or like building security. This is the
level of your corporate knowledge.
Yeah,
I got you.
Right.
So true confessions. Here we go.
Yeah.
But how old are you at this time?
I was
26
or 27. Okay. Yeah,
right.
So pretty young. And long story short, I applied to the job. Applied for the job. I got the job, and I got into Goldman, and was there for 3 years as part of the in-house English program. And one thing led to another, and I had an opportunity to join Goldman full-time as part of their learning and development department. And that's what launched my career in human resources.
So how long did you stay in human resources?
So I was with Goldman from 2000 to 2009, so 9 years.
9 years?
9 years.
Oh, so all that human resources was done in Goldman?
So when I say human resources, I mean so learning and development, and then
part of their human resources.
There were different departments.
Staff. I got you. I see.
Yeah. There were different. I worked in different departments.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
so then from there, after that 9 years was over, which was probably a very enjoyable 9 years.
Oh, it was great. Yeah.
Sure was.
Yeah, challenging but good experience.
Did you ever want to go back home or go to the States, or do you want to now? Or?
I think earlier on in my life, I always felt kind of homesick, missed my parents and missed life in the U.S. But over time, I still miss my parents. I wish they lived closer to me, but I more and more have found Japan to be my home.
How long do you think that took in years?
That's a good question. I would say it took a good 10 years.
So would you decide then that you're going to be here indefinitely?
It wasn't like I made a conscious decision, but I guess how I answered the question, are you going back to the U.S., changed. So I started saying, I'll never decide.
How long have you been here?
I've been here 28 years.
28 years.
So I came to Japan in 1996, and I remember that Starbucks also came to Japan in the same year, 1996.
Isn't that interesting?
Which is interesting because I could see how society, like around here, changed before and after.
Where'd you live during your time? Where have you lived mostly?
Mostly in Tokyo. I lived in Kanagawa Prefecture earlier on. I've lived in Osaka for 4 years as well. So I've seen a bit of the country.
Osaka and Tokyo are two different places.
They're very different. Yeah, people are different. I've lived in Japan continuously. I've been back to the U.S.
What's the longest time you stayed out?
Gosh, maybe 2 weeks.
Okay.
A bit longer. That's all. Yeah.
Can't wait to get back up.
and like you say, coming back into Narita or to Haneda Airport and seeing the rice fields, there's a sense of release, peace,
right.
Being back home.
When you left Goldman Sachs, where'd you go from there?
So I left Goldman during the financial crisis, 2009, and by that time, I'd been, aside from my English teaching experience, I'd been working for a Gaishke company, and
which is Gaishke?
Foreign capital company.
Foreign capital company. Okay.
Yeah, in Goldman, and I wanted to have the experience of working for a truly Japanese company, a global Japanese company, and I wasn't so fussed on the industry. And one thing led to another, and I had a chance to join Takeda Pharmaceuticals in Osaka, in their headquarters.
Doing what?
Talent development, talent management, really focusing on helping the people be ready to make Takeda a global company. Okay. I think half of its revenue was coming from Japan, half from overseas, but there wasn't really any global infrastructure. So the corporate functions such as human resources, IT, quality control, even areas like manufacturing, there no real cohesion to these functions, and they specifically wanted to hire a non-Japanese person that had an external perspective on these areas to help them make the company more cohesive and really change the culture in the company.
Were you able to do it?
I think so. I mean, not by myself, of course.
Oh, no, I know,
worked with many people,
yeah.
but I think I made a contribution to the way the company was structured in the form of establishing global heads of these corporate functions, working on leadership development programs, rotation programs, job rotation, doing some analysis or analytics with an employee survey. A lot of interesting work, a lot of fun stuff in a sense.
Are you still with them?
So I left Takeda a few years ago. I worked as an independent consultant for a while, and then I joined another company.
How many children do you have?
I have one son.
Okay.
Yeah. So
why do we tend to do what we have, what we grew up with? I grew up with 4, so I wanted 4.
Oh, really? Yeah.
You grew up with 1, so you have 1 son. How old is your son now?
He's 17. He'll be 18 this July. Yeah.
Did you put him through Japanese school?
He went to Japanese elementary school and junior high. Back up a bit. When we lived in Osaka, he went to an international school. There was a German school close to where we lived, where he went to kindergarten, and then for in the international school, their version of elementary, grade 1 and 2, I think it was. He went to a school called St. Michael's in Kobe. And we ended up moving back to Tokyo with my job, and he joined the elementary school near our apartment in Tokyo. So he had both international school experience and then the local school experience. So his English and Japanese are quite good.
So what about now? What is he doing now?
So he attends it's a public international school. It's an international school, but it's not the American school. It's run by the city government. But it's an international baccalaureate IB program.
What's the name?
It's located
in Yokohama,
close to Shibuya.
Shibuya, okay.
It's right across from Tokyo University.
Right across from Todai.
Todai.
Okay. Is he enjoying it?
I think so. Yeah.
So his Japanese is good, reading and writing.
Definitely.
And his Japanese his English is getting
English is good, yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's He's 17 years old. What sports does he like?
He's not so much into sports. He likes music.
Okay, what kind of music?
So he's part of he plays percussion in a music club.
That must have drove you nuts at home. Oh, no, because now they have the percussion where they can put on headphones and go like this, and you just hear him hitting, tapping the thing,
But he usually practices at school.
Okay.
So most weekdays, and then on Saturdays he goes to school and he practices with the club. So fortunately for us, he's not banging on drums at home.
Okay. Before I end the podcast, there's a question I'd love to ask.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
If you could go back in time and meet the younger Steffen, and give him advice based upon what you know right now, what advice would you give him, and how old would he be?
Okay, yeah. I love this question, and I've thought about it. I would go back to probably to my teen years, so back quite a ways. And I would want him to know the concept of ichigo, ichi-ei. Have you heard of this expression before?
Yes, I've heard it. You have to explain it in English.
Yeah, so I have to explain what that means. So it comes from tea ceremony, but to explain it briefly, the concept is being fully present with someone when you meet them, and fully enjoying the moment and being present in the moment with someone, because you never know if or when you'll see them again. And I can think of so many times in my life, and even today could be an example, where you're with someone and you can share the moment, but you think, oh well, I'll see that person soon, maybe in next week or a month or in a year, but you never know what's going to happen.
Well, the nice thing about this is ours is being recorded, so you'll be able to look at it whenever you feel like it. Our moment has just become eternal.
Okay, yeah.
Steffen, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lance. It's been a pleasure.
I want to thank all of you for watching or listening to this podcast. And never forget, it's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars.
Because you're too blessed to be stressed.